Today, Laurën Blum is going to speak to us about longevity. She grew up in the wilderness of Alaska and the Pacific Northwest. She has experience in philosophy, herbalism, yoga, North and South Native American Indigenous medicines. She's married that with quantum physics, traditional and modern medicine to guide us to a fully integrated and coherent state of being.
Woohoo! Cool.
So between these different modalities and narratives, including energy medicine, she is going to enlighten us on ways that we can apply this knowledge to our lives and hopefully experience the results that she is getting in her life. So I'd like to welcome Laurën Blum to come up and talk to us. Yes, yes.
Wow, what a gift. Hi, Ian. I love that you said narrative a moment ago because I'm a storyteller. And I think all of us, our life is kind of a story and we get to be the author of it. So I'm going to tell a story today and kind of take us on a journey. And I'd like for each of you to just think about it now that as I'm speaking, and I hope someone can, wave at me if I'm starting to go a little over.
Yeah, someone will stand up in the back.
I don't have a clock. Yeah. But where do you find yourself in the story? And so I'm not going to get into a mythical tale or anything today, unfortunately. Maybe we will. Who knows? Maybe we'll go there. But if I'm telling a story about some little family of bears in a hollow log, do you see yourself in the log? Or are you one of the bears, right? So where do you see yourself in the story today?
Running.
Hopefully. So also, I want to just say something about essentialism. And so with the storytelling today, I'm going to try and just speak only what is essential. So to not run on about any side pieces, but I'm going to be going over some headier information. So if any of you have questions at any time, or I'm just speaking to really concisely about something and not going into detail, please ask.
Could you speak a little louder?
I can speak louder, yes. I'm sorry. I'm working on that. I tend to talk really quiet, even up close with someone. But yeah, so if you have any questions, please ask, and then I might just ask you, or please don't take it personally if someone is asking questions and I kind of interject to help you also be essential with what you're asking. So try and stick to the kind of the point today and the place I'm trying to take everybody to. And there's lots of ways to get there, so I want this to just be a fun shared space. So yeah, talking about longevity. So yeah, I feel like I'm telling y'all what to do. Yeah, there. Can we just kind of sit here?
Yeah, you can sit if you want to also.
You didn't need to tell us what to do. You're the speaker.
Oh well. Thank you. So longevity, and I think that by definition, it almost doesn't fit or make sense when we want to think about me as a human being. Like, oh, how long age? What does that mean? So for your longevity, we want your longevity span to match your lifespan. That's really the bottom line, right? And I think a lot of people, when they talk about longevity, they just think physical health or vitality, but there's so much more to that, right? It's fulfillment. So how do you have a fulfilling life? I think there's much more to longevity than walking up the stairs by myself past my 70s. Like, my body might not like that because I'm going to use it while I can, and I might not be the gentlest person. So, if I get injured hiking a mountain, that's wonderful, and I'll live with that. But I want my spirit and my mind and that fulfillment, that joy, to go with me all the way. And so if we think about ourselves on our deathbeds, like, how would you like to die? Brain cancer, heart disease, or in the arms of someone you love.
The latter.
Yeah. And so, if you're over 60, you have, I think it's an 85% chance of dying from Alzheimer's in America. So why do we get Alzheimer's in our country when if you're in rural China or, I mean, there's almost an endless list of places that just isn't so. People pass away peacefully in their bed at night. They don't have these issues. So we're going to talk a little bit about diet, and where this comes in is actually our mitochondria. So does anybody know from, I think it's like 3rd grade science, what are mitochondria? Yes, what are they?
The brain of our red blood cells.
There we go. Beautiful, I like that answer. And so our mitochondria are responsible for our vitality. They are responsible for often also how we die and when. And to have healthy mitochondria, we kind of have to create an environment in our body that sustains that in a life-supporting way. So a very long time ago, we had calorie-poor, nutrition-dense diets, which is very ideal for mitochondria. And then with agriculture comes grains, and a little bit of grains, okay, but it takes our DNA 40 to 50,000 years to adapt to a change in our diet. And grains have been around for less than 10,000. So when we think of it that way, that's always helped me put it into perspective. Because I have, we all have people in our life, I love bread. And I have family that'll say, well, years ago we all just sat around and we would eat bread and like onions or broth, and bread's fine, people eat bread. I'm thinking, yeah, medieval people and slaves of Egyptians, because it wasn't life sustaining, longevity sustaining. So if we go back only that far in history, the general public who would eat a grain heavy diet, they were slaves. Their lifespan was only meant to be pretty short. They didn't want to have to take care of elderly slaves that couldn't work hard, right? So there's a lot of evidence all the way down the line. And then we have, I think it was, I did write things down, but I won't look. So somebody else correct me if I get this one wrong. But I think it was the 60s, right? We had the dwarf grains, like in America, that are with our agriculture. So with our dwarf grains, while that saved like billions of people from starving, was never meant to be a long-term sustainable move. And all those grains have extraordinarily higher content of gluten than natural traditional grains. And so then remember again, it takes 40 to 50,000 years for your DNA to process and adapt to that change in the diet. So we don't recognize gluten as food. Our bodies can't. And when you do eat something high in gluten, I'm not here to just bash gluten, just gotta say it's not the point. But the mitochondria, right? Extremely directly affected by what you eat. And so the mitochondria in the brain are heavily responsible then if we look at like Alzheimer's and having a healthy mind and being of sound mind and avoiding dementia and that sort of a thing. Well, when you eat gluten or an inflammatory food of any kind, eventually you'll get little tears in your gut, little small, and the food particle that is not fully digested will get into your blood, poisons your blood, and releases cytokines in the brain that then kill mitochondria. And so, are we all tracking?
Yep.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm like, I can skip ahead a little fast, but perfect. So, that's just the physical body part, right? And then with the foods, we understand that's how that works, and our blood is meant to carry nutrients, around the body, not metabolic byproduct and waste, right? So, the flip side of this, where we get into a little bit more of the energy medicine or indigenous practices. So I would say indigenous peoples, ancient peoples weren't eating high inflammatory diets, right? That's one. But the other component to this is sort of living in an alignment with spirit, whatever spirit is for each of you, but the spirit that is within each of us, right? And being in tune to our bodies and sort of intuitively knowing like I should or should not eat this food, should or should not be in this place or with these people or doing these things, and what is true for me. Mm-hmm. So emotions are physical, chemical like they're real things. Emotions are not made up. They're chemicals that are released in the hypothalamus of the brain, and they go down through the vagus nerve, through the heart, and into the gut where they're digested. So we physically digest our emotions.
Wow.
And the way that someone can actually hold a grudge for like 60 years is it's a very physical, like literal thing how that happens. So if you're walking in the woods and by yourself at night, okay, maybe you have a dog with you or a friend, and you're alone at night in the woods, so you're walking around and there's no lights, it's really dark, and you hear a twig snap. We could take two separate people in that same scenario. One person's not even going to notice it or flinch. They're not bothered. The next person's going to have all the horror films they've ever seen pop into their mind, and they're going to be in panic, right? So that's just how our senses work, right? So through one of our senses, we take in information. And then it happens like as fast as a gun going off that now we've decided to associate it with something else, and it basically releases a chemical in the brain, shoots into the gut, and the gut goes, oh, that's really good, I want another one. And so then you get a thought to conjure another chemical, and so the thought will confirm it, whether that's like every horror film you've ever seen, or the thought of, oh yeah, that's my dog, we're good, at least he's close, you know, it's fine. And so we don't have control over which ones pop up, if that makes sense. So just day to day, you know, you're driving the car, you slam on the brakes, and sometimes it might make you angry or frustrated, but other days you're like, oh, I hope they're okay. Like, so we don't really have control over which, yes.
Well, there's a balance. There's a balancing point in all things.
Yes.
Mind, emotions, and feelings.
Yes.
So, can we rely on our balance?
Practice.
There you go.
Practice, right? And so because this happens so quickly in the initials, I think we all know people like, you know, maybe every 6-year-old you've ever met, and they don't have very good balance of that or control. They can't really measure that I'm angry and I'm angry now, or, you know, whatever they're feeling. And so, but as you get older, you know, you learn to practice that and to sit with the feelings, like we sat with the beautiful heart, kind of that meditation, and you can feel like, oh, you know, I'm in this beautiful room with these beautiful people, and I'm aware that I have sadness. You know, I feel that, but I'm not identifying that I'm sad. It's just something my body's showing me. And it can be both and. I can be at a funeral where I'm grieving the loss of a loved one, and I can be laughing, you know, at a joke or the memory of something funny with this person. So you can be feeling multitudes of things at once, right? And it takes a lot of practice to not allow for that to become the grudge that you're holding for 60 years. Because with that whole the example I'm giving in the woods, so if you were mad about something and it were to last for a very long time, it's because then every time your gut requests more of those chemicals, the brain's going to show sort of a movie of, here's the story now. And 60 years from the date of the incident, that story is nothing like what happened. You know, we create more and more evidence to support and validate our emotions.
Memories.
Yeah. So our body, our gut, becomes addicted to whatever we feed it. And that's why if you've ever changed your diet, and I mean like changing your diet and then you maintain it for at least 6 months, right? A big change in your diet. You'll notice that it's kind of difficult for a few weeks or days, but then all of a sudden the new foods taste really good and you start to enjoy, and you're not craving the old foods so much. And that's because the gut is addicted to whatever we feed it. And when you have a chemical produced from your own body, that's the most addictive thing on the planet. We have the largest manufacturing factory on the planet in our brain. So anytime that you get, there's some core emotions, right? Like some core emotions, I would say, but then you get something like depression. And this is a unique cocktail for every single person. And it's a little recipe of the perfect blend of what's depression for you look like. And so you can't really go, well, I just feel sad and I don't need to worry about my sadness. But it's like, well, I'm sad and I'm suppressing joy and I'm angry and it's you kind of, there's a whole bunch in there, this whole, cocktail, right? So 75% of our immune defense cells, I should say, are in our gut. So if you have this gut that is just digesting pain, shame, blame, guilt, you know, all the what we need a name for this.
Junk.
I liked the cocktail ideas. So I'm saying like, like it's like the hard drugs.
Yeah.
Like they're the ones that are really hard to, come off of. But boy, nobody chooses it right out the gate. I don't think, you don't wake up one day like, I'm gonna do something real bad for me, but once it starts, you're like, okay, I kind of like this. Let's keep, I want to be angry. I'm justified in this. But yeah, so the more we stress our gut with that, your liver also is designed to, our liver processes stress. And that's, I would argue, emotional stress.
Mm.
You're born with a liver, you're not born with a bottle of any kind of substance, right? It's you. Your liver is processing you, like all that stuff. So we have this wonderful body, these wonderful organs, and this whole system that when you were in your mother's womb, it grew from cells that are still in your in you. There's this whole program, and your body knows the code for perfect health. Your body knows exactly for you what is the unique, recipe for you to have physical wholeness, right? And then there's all these other things out of our control, environmental stressors, whether it's what we're eating or where we're living, what we're exposed to, and then the thoughts, the emotions, all that. And so things quit working, things break down. And then there's a lot of different schools of thoughts here at this point, I think, is where we get to that segue. Like, I'm not determined about any specific one. I mean, there's a lot of great ideas out there and lots of sciences that take us a lot of different ways. But there's one particular school of thought that I want to bring here today. And this comes from actually many different, not one specific group of indigenous peoples, but the Quechua people of South America. And I've sat with their shaman and trained with them. And they look at this stuff we're talking about, and they have one of the best sort of mindsets around it. And they just look at 3 different types of illnesses. There's the illness of man, which is, I think they even include like physical illnesses as an illness of man, like it's man-made. You're doing it to yourself if you're sick. And then there's the illness of God. Maybe it was just the 2. And so an illness of God it's kind of beyond your capacity of control. So it's spiritual, where it's like the only way to fix that, nobody else can do it for you. You need to go out there, go meet him on the mountain and deal with that. And so they have a very simplistic view of it, but they're also very healthy and they're not dying from Alzheimer's or any of this kind of stuff, heart disease, right? And so with the emotions and the organs and all of this stuff, it's kind of their like way of doing it is, you eat a healthy diet, sure. But then if you have, let's say you just get a tumor, okay, tumor's growing and they cut it out, and then 2 years later it grows back. Why does that happen? And does anybody know why that happens?
You didn't change your diet. Habit,
They didn't find the root of the cause.
physical habit.
So this is great. Okay. These particular, and I'm not saying anyone is wrong, but with this school of thought, the reason that happens is there is a code, a program, so software, if you will, that's programming and informing the hardware. So the software would be your luminous energy field, the LEF, and the hardware is the nervous system in the brain. And so that software informs the hardware, and this is where they've seen, and there are modern groups of doctors that work closely with a lot of these indigenous healers today. There's many great resources. I'm happy to share all my resources with all of you if you're interested. And they're doing amazing work. And so seeing the results of, yes.
So kind of what you're saying is, since those indigenous people of South America don't have computers, they don't get the software to get them sick?
I love that. That's really good.
They don't have the human habits that make them sick.
Well, I would say what they don't have is separation. So, yes.
Tell us more about the luminous energy field.
Yes, perfect. So these just tie together perfectly. I think the root here with the Quechua specifically, they don't believe that they were ever separated from God or source. They do not believe they were ever cast from the garden. They believe that we live in the garden and we're stewards of the garden. And you could take it a step further to say that you are the garden, right? So you are the steward of your vessel and of this earth. Yes.
So that means there actually is a heaven on earth as lived by their actions.
I would agree with that, yes. I think that
Okay.
that sums up their view. And so the conquistadors came and messed things up for these people. And when that happened, they got to hide their views, their beliefs within Catholicism. So the LEF is portrayed, and now would be great if I could show you. But the LEF is portrayed beautifully through artwork in all kinds of Catholic art. When you see the Mother Mary, or you see the halo, around different beings who are meant to be enlightened or connected to, source or spirit or God. And so your LEF is kind of this like grapefruit-sized ball of light or energy, and it's just kind of right up here over your head, right? There's that's part of where you would maybe feel it. A lot of people, when they're learning about this, they can sense it here. And you guys could try this right now if you wanted to. And it just sort of feels like you're just dipping into something. And we use our imaginations, like we're just making this stuff up. But once you open yourself to the idea of it, then it becomes very real. And so the LEF is also, we have other really great diagrams. So NASA and a lot of doctors, I can list all these resources for you guys. They have equipment that they can measure this. They can scan it. They can show you on a computer screen, like they can show you your LEF and what's going on. And as you when you're first born, you have this vibrant, amazing bubble of energy and electricity coming out of your system. That's your LEF. And when you're on your deathbed, the closer you get, or anytime you have an illness that's really weakening your immune system, that LEF sort of shrinks around your body. Yes.
So is this LEF that you speak of, is it synonymous with our aura or electromagnetic energy?
Different from the aura. And so the LEF is sort of like, if I walk near you, and if close your eyes, please. So if I come close to you, like tell me when you can feel me kind of penetrating your bubble, just tell me when to stop. When can you feel me in your
I feel
space?
you now.
Yeah. So see how far away we are?
Mm-hmm.
So that's your LEF.
Okay.
And so that's when you're walking in public, and maybe you're in the grocery store or you're at a music festival, and you don't even have to really like lock eyes with someone, but you go like, I'm gonna go over here. Like, this feels good over here. We like this. Not so much right here. I don't know what this is, but I don't think I like this. And so then there's also separate, and I'm trying to be essentially here, so I'm rifling through a lot of different resources and things I could cite for you guys, but they've done studies to show water retains memory, and it can actually exchange memory and information. So we're sharing DNA just by coming into that kind of contact without actually touching. So there's a way to read the information, like someone could take your info in your DNA in your field, right? And they could read about me because I was just in your space. And so our bodies are mostly water, and we're always sending, receiving, sort of storing some information. So how this ties back into, like, say the tumor won't go away, the cancer that won't go away, or you're drinking all the green juice, you're doing all the exercise, but you just can't lose that last 15 pounds. What's that about, right? There's a program. This is a code that's running. And so I don't know if any of you are familiar with polarity work, but same concept, right? So a really fun way to explain this is that if I have a north and a south pole, and I've got negative and positive conduits and electricity, and I'm just a whole board of electricity and circuits, a signal might go from the top of my head to my toes, let's just say, and it's gonna just pinging back and forth, and that would be a perfectly healthy luminous field. And then something happens, and there's a little bit of a gray zone here now, where the energy is not flowing. So as the signal is going to come down, it stops here. It goes right back up. And it's just trying to get through, just pinging back and forth. Yeah.
How would the luminous field and these polarities interconnect with what some teachers talk about, like the toroidal field around us? How would that?
There, honestly, once you start getting into that, I feel like it's just a matter of like language.
No. Okay.
Like the way that we explain some of these things, it's very much, there's a lot of this stuff is like it's the same stuff, but because you're going to different sources, they just have a different language. But you'll find, like I found that where I'm like, oh, it's kind of the same. This is the same. And then how is it different? Sometimes it's only different in the application, like the way that you're working with it, right? Moving the energy, you're sensing it. But if you have this, where it's just this can't go through, over time, that's where illness could come in, or over time, that's where maybe a tumor could grow. And so they remove it, but the energy on the energetics level, it's still there. And so just like when, if they cut out, like people who get a hysterectomy, right, the energy is still there, as if the organs were still there. Mm-hmm. And people that, lose a limb, right, they still feel it. So through many, many, many different techniques, and tools, resources, right, there's a lot of ways of getting in and accessing and checking out your luminous field and checking out, do I have some dead zones going on in here? Am I flowing properly? Some people are chakra people. Some people aren't. There's people who are energy center people, not chakra people. Some people are just organs. Some people, are more into Reiki. There's just so many different ways. And I'm not saying that anyone is better or more applicable. So it's kind of what you feel works for you. But yes.
I just wanted to interject something when you talked about when you have a hysterectomy or whatever, that the imprint or the energy is still there. I just did a dissection class, human dissection class, and it was very interesting because one of the bodies had the gallbladder removed, and the exact imprint is still on the liver.
Yeah.
And the same thing as the uterus, even so her organs had sort of moved south a little bit, which is normal. She was an old lady. And yet in the back of it, on the fascial layers, there was still the imprint of the uterus. It was amazing. So it's not just an energetic thing, it's actually even a physical
and
imprint.
So there's the energetic code, well, if I may. So you have an energetic code, right? Or the computer example is nice. So you're coding in a software. I'm not a computer I don't do coding. I don't know about that for computers. But if you've ever seen computer code, like the first computers they had, right, where it was just all these numbers and codes, that's overwhelming to me. I'm I don't speak that language, but it's the same concept. It starts from that, and now it is, Windows or Mac, whatever you open, and you get to see these beautiful images on the screen instead. There's it creates a form, right? So you have this information that's coding something. There's the physical manifestation of that. So last night someone even said, so what causes cancer? And I'm like, okay, let's just pretend that there was no answer to that question, because we're always learning new things. So the cause of cancer in one person could be self-loathing, because there's a study on that. And sometimes that's the underlying cause. But is that true for everyone? I can't say, and I don't want to. I like to be open more to some other possibilities, but there can be emotional, so spiritual, and this again goes back to the ancient practices of checking in with your spirit, walking in the Aini, right, relationship. And so you'll have, and we need another example here, just like a person, it's me, okay, and I'm living my life, and maybe I'm not speaking up to my parents when I'm 7 years old, and they're telling me what they want to tell me about, this is a true story. You can't say, oh my God, you'll go to hell, because that's taking Lord's name in vain. And I was 7 years old, and I said, really? You think that one God made the whole world, and he's so powerful that if I say one little word, it's going to ruin everything? And my dad was like, so at some point,
awesome.
At some point, that goes, where does that go? Right? When we're a kid, and we're so to the point of that hey, no, that's not true for me. We have a voice, we're outspoken. We're I don't think so. And it's easy to kind of know and do that. But at some point, for survival, that goes away, because we are, we want to be accepted by the village. We need, for survival, we can't be an outcast. So we also can't do anything about the adults when we're children, and we are so pure and on point and close to remembering why we're here and all this stuff. So they're bigger and stronger than us, so we have to conform. We make little agreements. And so then this goes again to the Quechua shamans. Their medicine is you form agreements on a soul level. You make a contract with yourself that says, when I express, I'm not loved. Like, this isn't safe for me. If I have an open heart, I'm not safe. And then you can make these contracts, and when that happens, a little piece of your soul's, like their school of thought, splinters off, and it hides deep, deep, deep in your underworld of your soul, of your subconscious. And so every time you just do this, you kind of, it's like you cease to exist a little more, right? But we start this like as young as age 7, maybe sooner. And it's there. It's always there. It's in your subconscious, so it's in your dreams. It comes up for you in other people. The person you first date, like, wow, what an amazing mirror that is when you date somebody and they bring up all the things for you and you're like, you and me, like, it's this whole journey. But all those things come back and they come back and they come back. And one, we often don't know the language of our own body. We don't know our body's language or our soul's language, so we miss the message every time. And then 2, we're so overstimulated and overloaded with information that when do we get quiet? I mean, truly quiet. Like, when's the last time you went to a country where you didn't speak the language, you didn't know a soul, and you just sat in it, like, alone with yourself? Not a lot of people do that. And then we want to avoid, we like to escape, we like to get away from the discomfort. We don't want it to be our fault that we did that to ourselves, that we abandoned ourselves because it was mom and dad's fault. It was so-and-so's fault. Right? We like to be the victim, part of us, while at the same time we want to be the hero and the author of our life and the one leading the show. And so, do we contradict ourselves? Yes, very well. I contradict myself. So, the more that you have this sort of, it's this whisper like, hey, don't do that, do this. The more we're not hearing it, right? Then all of a sudden, now my back hurts. Now I'm sick. Now my gut's all out of whack because I'm suppressing the stress and the chemicals, and now I'm all a mess here. And that can turn into actual conditions, right? Or maybe one day it turns into a tumor growing. So how did that start? You know what? I don't really know, but I would just say it started the day you're born. And as soon as you start to conform and become someone you're not, that's when this sort of soul level sicknesses begin. And the body is going to then show you the physical manifestations of that. So that is why the Quechua people look at it like you have 2 sicknesses. There's only 2 illnesses. You've got man and God, and that's it. And so everything we just talked about falls into the man sickness.
How do they differentiate that? What is man, what is God?
So everything we just discussed, everything I just said, that would all fall into like the man, illness of man, that's like humankind. That's our responsibility. That's my job to deal with me, right? And if I'm getting really sick or having an autoimmune issue, that's on me because with their beliefs, it's like that's coming from you. That's your soul trying to, the soul will stop nothing short of catastrophe to get what it needs. So, yes.
So you started out talking about diet and
Yes.
how that affects you, but now you're talking about thought and how that affects you.
2 in 1.
So your thoughts have just as much power as your diet, if you think about it.
Yes, but I wouldn't say that
You
it's...
can think yourself well regardless of your diet, but your diet won't make you well if your thoughts are off.
I wouldn't go so far as to say that. Maybe yes, and like someone who is very, very highly dedicated to a practice, and that was sort of like we see monks, if it's like that's all you're doing, I would imagine there's a lot of strength in that. For the average person living in this country, I would say how it really ends up happening is that if your gut is not okay, like from what you're eating, then when those emotions hit and your thoughts, you're just, good luck. Like that's kind of how, in our modern world, that seems like that's really what we deal with. Yes.
Could you share with us a place in your narrative where you decided to go on the healing and shamanic path?
That was a huge question.
What kind of story do you want? You want a dark story or like a happy one?
The story about when you realized
Yeah.
that these people came to live in the Garden of Eden
Oh.
And they came to be children of God, not of man.
I think I kind of just knew that when I came out, because I always told my parents they were wrong about it. I would have nightmares that my parents were going to like sacrifice me to Satan at church. So I just came out like, y'all are wrong, and I was the only one of 6 children to have that opinion, so that was pretty unique to me. But I just came out not trusting anything. I'm like, no, none of you know what's going on. But I have learned that now I just say I believe in everything, because if you believe in something, there's power to it. I don't agree with the details of my parents, whatever, but I see it work for them. They pray to God and talk to Jesus, and they have so much peace from that, and I don't knock on it, right? But they also, I realize, believe that just as feverishly as someone with a very opposing view believes what they believe. And so I think if it brings you inner peace, that's what it's about. So for me, I just didn't have a lot of inner peace from day one. I'm like, something's up, guys. Like, what are we doing? This feels very suspect. I don't really like being here. I would say that a lot as a kid too. Like, I don't like being here. I don't want to be here. And it was never like a depressive, suicidal thing. It was just, I just don't want to be here. Like, there's got to be something more. I'm ready for. I go home. Like, what are we doing here? And I struggled with that for a long time. But I also fortunately grew up in a very interesting family. So I have relatives. We call my aunt the witch doctor. My family's also somehow very Christian, but they have a lot of very edgy things. So we didn't go to the doctor when we were kids. And went to my aunt, and she can be on the phone with you or right in front of you and tell you like, oh, well, this organ scores a 3 out of 10, so maybe you should take this nutrition for that organ, right? Witchcraft. So I grew up in that, and then I started having things happen to me, and when I went to my family about it, I'd say like, this is happening, and they go, oh, the devil's just chasing you, or oh, you have an overactive imagination. I'm like, no, but it's still happening though, and that's not helpful. So it's still happening, and I had a lot of just strange things happen. So dismemberment was the theme for like the first, I would say, like 18 years of my life. So I had a lot of crazy things happen. I'm a very, what would I call it? I'm an adventurer. I love adventure. I love it. And I'll do some crazy things where I probably should have and could have died, and I would not get hurt. But then I'd come home from this crazy trip where I'm like doing very dangerous things, and I'd just be walking out of the car and like trip and break my elbow and my collarbone, and I'm like, how did that just happen? Like, I have survived crazy things, but I always get hurt doing nothing, like just doing nothing. Wow. And so I would have these injuries that this is kind of, for me, it was like, as soon as one would heal, I'd hurt something else. As soon as one would heal, I'd hurt something else. And it was like my whole body was just got to this point, like my obliques started disconnecting from my side, and the doctors are like, we don't really have a reason why this happens, but we see it sometimes in athletes, like your muscles just disconnecting, and it would sort of slide down, be really heavy and strange. Broke all my ribs in a car accident, broke this collarbone on the right side and these first 3 ribs, and then as soon as that healed, I broke this elbow. I was like, this is not, I can't do anything.
So did all this happen on your way home? Maybe you just didn't want to go home?
really great. I never thought of that. But it was just happening a lot, and after, I like year 2 of this sort of life, I was like, this is just still not, like, not only did I already not want to be here, but now I really don't want to be here. Like, what is going on? So I just knew something had to change, and I'm like, something's not right. I don't feel good about much going on. And a lot of it was that I couldn't talk about, I didn't have a community. I couldn't talk to my family about more deep things like what we're talking about here. And so then the illness of God, that how they reference that, where I'm like, I feel super disconnected from whatever my source is. It's not this source that you guys are offering me, and I know it's not, so what's the match? I didn't have the right people to speak to about that. So I went on an interesting journey that I couldn't explain. Like, I knew I just was at that place, and then I remembered meeting a woman like 5 years prior in a bar who we had nothing in common, and she insisted that we be friends. So I went, I agreed eventually, and like was at her house one day for coffee. And she's very modern, very businesswoman, very chic, like this very clean modern home, and like high heels and office clothes. but then I see a book for spirit animals on one of her shelves, and I commented on the book. And she goes, "Oh, that's for my mom. She's like a shaman or something." Just rolled her eyes. And I just remembered that one moment, which is so random and not important, right? But I remembered it like 5 years later when I'd hit this point of being like, it's like, dig her number out and like, "Can I talk to your mom?"
Good for you.
So I call her mom out of the blue. Someone does not know me. And she's like a scientist, but also a shaman. And so I call her, I'm like, "Hey, we don't know each other, but have you ever heard of the Four Winds?" And she just chuckles. She goes, "Yeah, I know Alberto. We studied together before he opened his school. You should go." And that was just our conversation. So I had started researching online. I'm like, I need to find something else. And I don't know when the word shamanism came into play, but it did. So I Googled that and I found this school. So I went there. And that was like the start of it. And then, you know what, I don't get injured anymore. I don't, these things don't happen. Yes.
Well, how old were you by that time?
I don't remember. Someone just asked me that the other day too. I was probably 23. Not really sure. And so while I was there, I remember being, having what they call it spiritual surgery, and it hurts really good. So I had some men working on me, and they kind of told me like 2 years later. So when you get these sort of healing sessions, they don't want you to create a story. So you'll have this experience, you'll feel things, you'll see things, and they're like, "We're not going to talk to you about it. You can tell us what you experienced, but I'm not going to tell you anything because you can't create a story about it." And so a few years later, because these men had become my colleagues, I just, I'm like, "All right, you got to tell me now. Like, tell me now, what was it? What happened?" And then that's where the dismemberment came up. And they said, "Well, just know you have to be dismembered before you can be remembered." So when we went in, energetically, we just took you apart and put you back together. And kind of removed the things that were in the way. So there was something actually right where that oblique had been, that energetically where they could find, they're like, "There's a big space here." And I also had something going on in my hips where they just kept taking stuff out. They were taking stuff out. I couldn't walk after that session. My hips hurt so bad I couldn't walk. And the next day, I had gone down in a pant size, and I'm not kidding about that. My hips had just come back together. There was so much space, and I had a lot of hip injuries leading up to that. So for me, it was like, that's the hard proof, and then feeling that difference, and oh wow, I can walk comfortably and run, and everything's more together, and my soft tissues are where they need to be. So yes.
Can you make the connection between stress and diet?
Yeah. So when we have stress, our bodies, we actually digest it. It goes into our stomachs. And so that's why, one day you can eat any food, right? Like eggs and yogurt or something, it's fine. But maybe the next day or just shortly after that, you can't eat it. It makes you feel really irritated because the microbiome is sort of always changing. I think one of the least stable things in our bodies is our microbiome. They just change really quickly. So when you eat, they eat first. You're feeding, over 3 trillion. And so I'm not saying don't have chocolate cake, but maybe eat some nutrient-dense food before you eat the chocolate cakes. Give them the fuel that they need to do their job. And then I could recommend to you a really excellent probiotic. So I also studied under this man named Compton Ram. And he has a company, it's a very small company, but they make probiotics. And they study heavily, they just study fecal samples from people who've never had antibiotics. And back in during the Holocaust, there were some men who survived because there were women in prison with them who'd had babies. And their bodies did produce milk, although they were starving. So the babies were able to eat. I think all the babies died, but while they were alive, these men actually got to the point where they were just eating from the babies. And they stayed so healthy that their guards got sick, and these men were able to overpower them. That's because of the microbiome. So these men have passed on, but there's books written about them and interviews and stuff. Again, I could share these resources with you guys. But how amazing that, you can be starving to death, and then just by having the right cultures in your gut, you can be strong. So they're very sensitive. And I mean, to be going from starving to death to having if you think about that like an infant's droppings, that's just really strong probiotics, right? That's really strong bacteria. And it made all that difference. And those men were also under probably like the most stress of what, more than we've ever experienced being in a concentration camp. So pretty amazing. And we all have stress, right? So there's a lot of, again, there's so many ways. There's so many different, you can meditate, you can do like so many different things to alleviate your stress. But I think most powerful thing is to learn to be with it. Can you sit in the fire and not lean back? So whatever you have going on, and when you have the emotions, do you guys want to try something actually? Do you want to try it? Okay.
Sure.
So this is an exercise, just a somatic practice that becomes like brushing your teeth. This is just a hygiene for your gut. And so what you'll do is put your hands, try and tune into your gut. So you can close your eyes and just imagine being in the gut. Is anyone here a real visual learner? Okay, so here's a visualization for you. Just imagine, so closing the eyes, you're currently in your mind. I'm talking, so you have to be. And just picture the room of your mind. It's probably, might even be like a library. It's so much information. And so notice the room and find the door. There's a door to your mind. Notice the door. What color is it? What's it look like, smell like, feel like? And open the door. Step through the door and close it behind you. And you're in a long hallway. It's dark. Very long hallway. And you're just going to walk down that hall. And intuitively, you know where it is, but you're going to go to the room of your gut. So at the end of the hallway is another door. This is the entrance to your gut, the seat of your intuition. So noticing that door, open it and close it behind you. Now you're in the gut, and it's this dark room with a spotlight in the middle. So take a seat like you're in a theater. And then just ask yourself, quietly to yourself, just ask, are there any unexpressed emotions that need to be felt? Are there any unexpressed emotions that need to be felt? Maybe you notice like this swirling of many emotions and energies in that spotlight now, but wait until you can name just one. Just one. It doesn't matter if it's the one you want it to be, but you'll name one and allow it to take that spotlight center stage. Name it. And now you just feel it. So this feeling is this emotion is a chemical. It can only exist in your system for 90 seconds. That's it. It's not physically possible for you to feel an emotion for more than that unless you are intentionally
Keeping it
calling
alive.
So just feel it and then letting it sort of flood your system. Maybe see if you can thank it for informing you and doing its job. Thank you for telling me. And that's it. That's the practice. So, did that not work for anybody? Did someone just totally lose me in that? Or was everybody kind of with it? Okay. You got lost? I'm sorry, I was going really fast too.
No, I started thinking about other things.
Oh, okay. It's okay. It's okay. So then to maybe finish that practice, like if we were in a one-on-one time together, I would then have you be kind of verbally giving me that feedback, like, okay, I think it's this emotion, right? And you might say like depression, and then I'd go, well, okay, that's not an emotion, so what's the emotion? Make you sit in it a little longer. And it's really a practice of getting out of the head. That's why it's helpful to walk out of the brain and really close the door behind you, like, I'm not in this room anymore. And you can walk back out. I like us to stay in the gut because you're going to get yourself out of there in a second anyway, but we try to stay in. And so you'll feel that one initial emotion, you're just feeling it, and you should feel it kind of lift and go, because just physically that's what's happening. And so if you're not feeling it and it's really lingering and staying there, there's more we could do. Yes?
That's kind of like a level of forgiveness, isn't it?
Yeah.
Being able to forgive what the mind, whatever the mind in your gut is telling you.
Yes.
And then, wow, do I want this or do I want to forgive it? And
Yep. Exactly. And so that's where how this all just like the whole thing coming together with the bow on top is that it's acceptance, right? So accept that your body, by even having an emotion that you maybe just don't want to deal with, it's doing its job. Like, your nervous system's working. That's amazing. What a gift, right? Like, it's a gift that you get to, and how much fun is it too? Like, how much fun that we get to be here in these bodies and experience unpleasant things too, you know, because you wouldn't know, right?
It's amazing.
And so then it comes down to, so it's acceptance, and that's not just with ourselves. We're usually pretty good at accepting things we see that are undeniable, like someone doesn't like you. You're like, oh, I can't do anything about that. But we know how to kill ourselves, and we do it really well, and we do it real slow inside, right? I'm gonna not accept myself, and no one's gonna stop me, right? Yes.
Have you found a community of like-minded people here?
This is it for here. I have not at all. So that's, I don't know how I feel about that. I'm like kind of sad, but I also don't get out a lot.
Your community is
Mine's
wide.
yes, international. I
Yeah,
have
yeah.
there's plenty of them, but we're all really spread out. And I know there are certain areas that you can live in. Like, I chose to come back to Alaska, and I'm sure I could choose to live in, I don't know, some place in California, but that sounds kind of exhausting to me, because I'm going to meet so many people that are so like-minded that they're not all actually like-minded. So you've got to like sift through the, like, I don't even know why you're talking to me. Like, what do you want from me, you know? But so the acceptance, and then it just kind of comes down to unconditional love and self-love, because you sleep with you every night. You sleep alone every night. It doesn't matter who's next to you. And you're always going to be alone. You're born alone. You die alone. And the part about the longevity and that vitality, so this is more than just the gut. This is more than my bones can break, my body can give out. I've been rough on my body, but it's the spirit. It's the spirit within, right? I want to get to the end of my lifetime with like peace, inner peace, and self-love and self-acceptance, and just love myself, you know, so hard. And if I can make it, because we're all going to make it to the point anyway. It doesn't matter, you know, we're all going to make it to the end. There will be an end inevitably for each of us. But wouldn't you just rather get there being relaxed and enjoying yourself than stressed out and worried and sick? You know? So it's that inner thing. And notice too, there's studies on this also. Joe Dispenza, if you guys like his work, you can be really sick or have a broken spine. And if you can really crack that code of self-love, you will not notice that pain. You will not notice that discomfort. And you were discussing this earlier. It's so true. So that we have such a power and the sovereignty over our bodies, and we've forgotten that. And when we're born, maybe not for everyone, but you know, for me and most people I know, born in a Western culture, that is stripped away from you. Your sovereignty is taken away the moment you're born. You're not allowed to have it because you're a sinner, or because whatever it is. Don't mean to go religious there, but you know, it gets stripped back. We're just raised in a way that isn't conducive for, you know, really connecting to that inner peace. It's all about externals. Yes.
Well, we've been lied to
Yeah.
about a lot of things, and I think the whole six feet. You know, when they were doing the COVID thing, it's like, oh, you have to stay 6 feet apart. That was nothing to do. If you look at the scientific data, for you to get their germs or whatever, you have to be 32 feet apart.
Right.
The 6 feet was that field that you were talking about. They didn't want us connecting our fields.
And how lonely that was, right?
Yes, it really affected us. And I really am fascinated with the etheric surgery that you had. Could you speak a little more of that?
Sure. So I think that we're all designed with the code ahead of time, like from the time we're in the womb. You know, you're designed to be your love. That's our purest form, right? I would say is love. I love how cliche that is, but it's
true.
It's all love, right? So everything's an emanation of that, and what you're seeing is what you're being. So I also think that I don't think that's an arguable one. What you're seeing is what you're being. So if we fast forward being kids to just modern day, if I'm feeling in a way that is not optimal and is not love or in alignment, we're just not trained to look inward at my responsibility in that. And can I accept that? Can I meet my heart where I'm at in that discomfort and be okay with it? Or am I just always going to be escaping it and evading it and looking to, well, I think I'm going to go volunteer now, or I'm going to dive in and nitpick at my partner because that maybe it's them. And so doing this time and time and time again over like all this time, and kind of you have this debt almost from your whole life of all the years of not loving yourself, right? So you've got all this other junk to sort of clear away. The little agreements we make from the time we're born where, oh, I'm not safe to be me. There was a first time for each of us that we were told, you can't be loved being who you are. So we shut that off. So your nervous system and the body, how, you know, we have fight and flight. So if something happens and you go into flight mode, you're just going to always be running away until you go into fight mode. And then you're going to be fighting life until you go into flight mode again, and then you're running away. And that's the go-to if you come into trauma or stress, where our natural go-to is like, oh, let me examine this. Like that would be the natural state, just neutral, like, oh, let me examine this. How interesting. This is a problem. How interesting. So if we can get back to that, it requires us to call all these pieces of ourselves back home that we've agreed to hide or sent away to the woods. It's bringing everybody home from the forest. And that takes a lot of practice and a lot of sitting with it. And so if you're at that point in your life where I was, that I had sent so much of me away that I'm pretty empty, walking around with like a continuously getting broken body. And there's a little bit of a science behind that too, where if you're really not at home spiritually, like your soul's kind of just not present, yeah, your body's like not protected, you don't have boundaries, you're super porous, like your bone density changes. I mean, like you change. So sometimes you need a bigger intervention, you need bigger medicine. That's all. Sometimes you just need medicine. So I haven't needed something like that for a few years.
But what was the actual experience like? Like, could you feel, were you conscious and aware?
Yeah.
Could you feel them reattaching your obliques?
Yeah. So sometimes, I'll just say this much on it because I don't like to create a story for someone else to compare their experience to later, because that kind of robs your experience from you. But I always tell clients, you might feel like I'm in the room with you over the phone. You might feel like I'm cradling your head, because I am with my intention, like I'm holding you. You might feel my hand reach into your chest. Just breathe. If it gets really painful, let me know. If it gets really ouchy, let me know. Everyone's different. Some people really don't feel anything. Some people just fall asleep. And that's really good for me because I get a lot done. But but some people do feel a lot, and so sometimes it just depends on the person's story and where they're at with like themselves. Okay, sometimes I have a client come in who really needs some junk removed, but I can't touch them because they're in a place that they're so unsafe to be in their body. They just need to be loved. They just need to be held, and so that's all we do for an hour and 40 minutes. Is I just hold them in love, and give them a light hypnosis first so they can go into a state where they're very relaxed. And as soon as you do that, as soon as you balance that nervous system and you're in a relaxed state, all your cells can just weave together. And it's amazing how much just lying, and if you do the little practice I showed you guys, you can lay down and go into your gut and just breathe and be like, what do I need to feel? Like what needs to be felt? You know, which emotion is not expressed. You'll start with sadness, you might do grief, you might, all this like unpleasant stuff, but then you'll come to like, oh, I've been suppressing joy, and now I need to feel my joy, you know, and then you go and check in with the heart, and just kind of this presence, it's a ministry of presence, so if you can be present with yourself, developing like a safety in that, because for a lot of us, I don't think any of you, but when you're in that earlier part of that journey, you're not safe to be with yourself. It's not safe to... Someone says, well, what do you want? And you're like, I don't know. And then your inner being's like, I'm not going to tell you. You don't listen. So when we first go into the gut, when I first learned, it's true. When I first learned this stuff, I would just be so frustrated. I'd be like in tears. I'd be laying there and I'm like, I don't know. There's nothing's coming through. And the wonderful woman that was guiding me through this stuff, she's like, yeah, I mean, you've just developed a relationship of, you know, middle fingers with yourself. So the body's like, you don't listen anyway. And so if that's what your experience is, you're just getting nothing, it's crickets all the time, keep going. That's a good sign. So there's this sacred marriage. It's like, I didn't think we'd get into this today, but it's great. Sacred marriage of the self. And so this is also something from the Quechua people's teachings, where they do it, I'm not really a chakra person, but it's this 7 chakra marriage So for each chakra, like represents these different needs. You have to have a nest that you feel safe in, you know, and it goes all the way from that to like not overshadowing, like, so it's all in you, but we're kind of imagining there's two people. So you wouldn't want to be in a marriage where one person just overshadowed the other in the external world. Like, I get all the attention and all the praise because of my career or whatever I do, and you're in the shadow. You don't want a marriage like that. But we do it to ourselves. Excuse me. And so this ministry of presence, of getting in there and being like, look, I'm stuck with you the whole time, the whole way. We're stuck together. I can't even walk outside. I mean, we can try that, but we're just still stuck here. So how would it feel to be married to someone and never speak for 40 years and never leave the house? You're stuck in this room for 40 years with one person and you're not speaking. And that's how most of us live our life. And most of us don't realize this till we're like over 50. So if you can realize that and then just make it your devotion of, I am the beloved of my soul, and every day I'm going to wake up and meet myself. And that is where we talk about the illness of man versus the illness of God. So they kind of get woven together, and it kind of, I think the whole root is right there. But the problem is that for the moment we're born and start to be raised and conform, we deny that, right? Yes. There was 2 questions. Yes?
How'd you find this group?
This group, it was kind of like how I found the 4 Winds, where I remembered somebody that had nothing to do with it, and then I talked to your mom, and then I talked to Laurën and Runkle, and she connected me with Dawn. It's just a very, very sideways thing. Yes.
Are you planning to teach a workshop sometime?
I would love to do that. I don't have anything set. I'm sorry, yes?
Oh, no, I love that though.
Oh, I thought, okay. And then,
I love speakers that ping on all points, and you are that.
oh, thank you.
And,
Awesome.
Beyond that, my big question is, can you, you said that you formed these different visions from your family. They're Christian or Catholicism, and from a very young age. Can you definitively point to possibly that other spirit or that Christian spirit not directing you towards asking the whys?
What was that?
That didn't make sense.
Can you definitively say that this is of you versus, say, a higher power or a Christian say, you need to question this?
Yeah, I think I understand the question. And I would say, yes, I could definitively say that was, I did not have any influence supporting me ever to question. It was the opposite. It was like, you shouldn't ask questions. You're a child. You speak when spoken to, and you do what you're told.
So would you say that was of you or of something else? The prompting those questions.
Oh, okay. I think it was that part. I don't want to say something else, but it's like, in a sense, it was something else until I could integrate that it was me.
Duality coming into oneness.
Right.
Is what you're talking about.
Contrast.
The parts of me that were kind of stripped away, if that makes sense. So it was all me, but it took me until, I think 2018, I actually had a wedding ceremony with myself. There was 56 people, and it was the most happiest day of my life. I married myself, and it was the best thing ever. But then for the next year, it was like I was actually suddenly dealing with this other person. Oh my God! Why are you mad at me? Why aren't you speaking to me? What did I do? What do you mean? And they said, nothing. And so for a whole year, I just had to love me bigger. I had to wake up and choose to love me more than I felt like I could,
Wow.
And so I've taught workshops on that because I think it's the most important thing. If you don't have a relationship like that with yourself, like, what are you doing? If anybody. I think about time though, guys. So.
Thank you.